Welcome to Pathfinding. The tea or coffee question, a thought experiment to refute the theory of God's free knowledge. Introduction. Here's a thought experiment to ascertain whether or not God has perfectly accurate knowledge of all future events. The reasoning of this thought experiment will defeat the concept of God's free knowledge, which posits that God has perfect foresight of all future human actions. This belief bolsters itself with a reliance on it being untestable within any practical framework. However, the tea or coffee question, a thought experiment I propose, hypothesizes a scenario that, although unusual, is not logically or biblically incongruent. The logic of this thought experiment reveals that the notion of God's infallible knowledge of all future human decisions is not compatible with human free will. An important thing to note is that this thought experiment is not presented as a defeater of God's extremely powerful, high-accuracy prediction ability. It is only a refutation of the infallibility of God's predictions and foreknowledge. The tea or coffee question. Imagine there's a very devout man. Let's call him Adam. Adam loves God and lives a holy life, and God loves Adam. One day, God decides to appear to Adam and to talk freely with him. God tells Adam that he will listen to him and also answer him as in a normal conversation between a father and son. Adam is very happy about this, and he asks God if there's anything in particular that God would like to discuss with him. God answers that it would please him to know what Adam would like to discuss. Again, Adam is very happy to hear this. He tells God that for a long time he has been wrestling with the concept of God's omniscience, and in particular, God's supposed capacity for perfectly knowing the future. God listens patiently while Adam recounts the various beliefs about God's omniscience and foreknowledge held by theologians, philosophers, and apologists. He first tells God about the notion of God's natural knowledge, where God knows the position, state, and movement of all energy, every particle, atom, and molecule, that he also knows every human thought and emotion at all times in the past, present, and even in the future, and how this knowledge means that God knows everything that ever could possibly transpire. Adam then tells God about the Molinist idea of God's middle knowledge, which is his ability to know perfectly what all free creatures would choose to do in any given situation, including all future situations and choices. Finally, Adam talks about God's free knowledge, where God supposedly knows everything that every person will ever think, feel, say, and do, even people many generations hence into the distant future. When he has finished recounting these philosophical views, Adam then asks God if he indeed knows everything that will ever happen and that all people in the future will ever choose to do. God tells Adam that it pleases him when his children endeavor to discover things through their own efforts and exploration, rather than just being told the answer. He then suggests that Adam find a way to test those theories. Adam then asks, "Is it not a sin to test God? To test you, Lord?" "Ah," replies God, then quoting Deuteronomy, "You shall not put the Lord your God to the test." "Yes, Lord," replies Adam. "However, it is a virtue to thirst for knowledge about the Creator whom you love and whom loves you," says God. Relieved by these words of encouragement from God, Adam thinks for a moment. Then an idea occurs to him, and he formulates a simple experiment to ascertain if God can indeed perfectly see the future. "Lord, to conduct my experiment, I'll need to ask you just one question." "But may I request that you give an honest answer?" asks Adam sheepishly. "I would never give any other kind," replies God with a warm smile. Adam then places a cup of tea and a cup of coffee in front of himself on the table. Then, taking a breath, asks God his question. "Lord, in a moment, I'm going to take a drink from one of these cups. Will I drink the tea or the coffee?" God then accesses his knowledge of the future and tells Adam that he will take a drink from the cup of coffee. Adam then takes a drink from the cup of tea. He then nervously turns to God and says, "Lord, as you gave an honest answer, my experiment shows that I have free will and that you cannot perfectly see the future." "Well done, son," replies God proudly. Adam smiles bashfully at this praise from God. He then asks if he can conduct one more related experiment. God grants Adam his request. Adam then asks God, "Lord, if you don't mind sharing my cup, would you look into the future and tell me which cup you will drink from?" God answers, "Of course, I don't mind sharing a cup with you, son." God again looks into the future and then tells Adam that he will drink the tea. Adam then asks God if he himself has the free will to now drink from the coffee cup instead of the tea. In answer, God smiles and reaches for the coffee cup and takes a drink. "You make a good cup of coffee, son," says God with a satisfied smile before taking another sip. Rationale. This thought experiment, though a theoretical scenario, does not violate any logic, nor does it utilize the impossible. Also, everything that occurs in this exercise has biblical precedence. In the Bible, we can read of numerous instances of God appearing to human beings in various forms. There are also examples of God communicating, even negotiating and debating with people freely in a back-and-forth two-way conversation. Abraham and Moses are two examples of this. Abraham negotiated with God to lower the price of deliverance from destruction for Sodom and Gomorrah. Moses acted as an advocate for the Israelites when God informed him of his intention to wipe them all out. So everything that occurs in this thought experiment is within the realm of possibility. 10 possible objections to the tea or coffee question thought experiment. 1. God would not enter into two-way communication with the man, so the man would not be able to contradict God's foreknowledge. We have seen multiple examples in the Bible where God has spoken directly to people. And, as already stated, we have even seen examples with Abraham and Moses where God has engaged in back-and-forth discussion and even debate and negotiations. 2. God would not reveal his knowledge of the future. There are multiple examples in the Bible where God informed people of future events. We have seen it where God has told them of things that will happen, and also things that may happen conditional on people exercising their free will choice. 3. God would give the man a wrong answer to ensure that the man drinks from the cup that God foresaw. In this thought experiment, God has agreed to be a willing and good faith participant. He has agreed to give an honest answer as to what he sees in the future. 4. God telling someone the future changes it. This is not a valid objection, because although Adam does indeed exercise his free will to do the opposite of what God told him, the thought experiment is testing if God knew that before he revealed it to Adam. 5. There are many examples in the Bible of God knowing the future. This thought experiment is to illustrate that God does not have perfectly accurate knowledge of all future events. It is not to show that God does not have an extremely high predictive ability. Past examples of God using his knowledge of human nature to predict the future with great accuracy, such as warning the Israelites through the prophet Samuel that a king will mistreat them, is not proof of God being able to know all future events perfectly accurately. 6. God knows all possible futures, including the one that occurred in this experiment. The thought experiment is not for the purpose of showing that God does not know all possible futures. It is only to show that God does not know with 100% accuracy which event will occur. 7. God would refuse to participate in the experiment to ensure that what he sees and knows about the future can never be wrong. This would be an example of God manipulating things by willful omission to ensure an outcome. If it is true that God can perfectly accurately see the future, then God telling someone that future should not change it. 8. God is not able to speak to people directly, or people are not able to hear God. Although this may not be a common occurrence, We have seen in the Bible that this has indeed taken place on multiple occasions. 9. God is not able to tell someone the future. Again, we have seen examples of this in the Bible. Also, if God were not able to tell someone something he knows, then that would be a more egregious limitation than not being able to see the future with 100% accuracy. 10. If God told someone the future, this very action would cause the person to be compelled to conform to it. If this were the case, it would be an example of how God's free knowledge and human free will are not compatible and are in fact mutually exclusive. Conclusion. This thought experiment shows that the idea of God's free knowledge and ability to see the future with 100% accuracy is reliant on it never being tested. The fact that this scenario is a hypothetical does not change or undermine the logic of the test. There is nothing in this hypothetical scenario that goes against the logic of what is theoretically possible. The reasoning of this thought experiment clearly shows that the concept of God's free knowledge is merely a human assumption and that he in fact cannot see the future perfectly accurately.